The mop moved in slow, steady circles across the polished floor of Building 7 at Fort Marshall Army Base in rural Georgia. The hallway was long and empty, except for the rhythmic squeak of the bucket wheels and the soft splash of water wrung from cotton strands. Maria Santos pushed the mop with the same focus she once used to clear rooms in Kandahar. But no one here knew that. No one asked. To the soldiers passing by, she was just the janitor, the invisible woman in the gray uniform who cleaned up after them. She was 42 years old. Her black hair, streaked with silver, was pulled into a tight bun. Her hands were rough and scarred. Her eyes were dark and calm, but they held something most people didn't notice. They held the weight of things seen and survived. Maria had been working as a janitor at Fort Marshall for 3 years. Every morning at 5, she clocked in. Every evening at 6, she clocked out. She mopped floors, emptied trash bins, wiped down windows, and scrubbed toilets. She did her job without complaint. She never spoke unless spoken to. And most days no one spoke to her at all, but that was fine. She preferred the quiet. The noise of her past was loud enough. It was a Tuesday morning when Staff Sergeant Kyle Brennan walked past her in the hallway. He was young, maybe 25, with a sharp haircut and a sharper attitude. He was talking loudly to another soldier, laughing about something. As he passed Maria, he didn't even glance her way. But then his boot caught the edge of her mop bucket. Water splashed across the floor. Kyle stopped. He looked down at the puddle, then at Maria. "Seriously?" he said, his voice dripping with annoyance. "Watch where you put that thing." Maria said nothing. She simply bent down and began soaking up the water with her mop. Kyle shook his head. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "Can't even mop a floor right," his friend laughed. They walked away, their voices echoing down the corridor. Maria wrung out the mop. Her jaw tightened, but her face stayed calm. She had learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting. Not with words, anyway. Later that afternoon, Maria was cleaning the West Wing restrooms when she overheard 2 officers talking outside the door. She wasn't trying to listen, but their voices carried. "Did you see the memo?" one of them said. "General Whitfield is coming next week." "Yeah, I saw it." "Big deal, right? Full inspection. They want everything spotless. Good luck with that. Half the staff here can't even keep their desks organized." They both laughed. "Well, it's not our problem. That's why we have people like her." One of them must have gestured toward the restroom because the other one chuckled. "Yeah, the cleaning crew. Let them deal with it." Maria stood inside the stall, rag in hand, perfectly still. She listened to their footsteps fade. Then she returned to scrubbing. She had stopped expecting respect a long time ago. The news about General Whitfield spread quickly through the base. Everyone knew his name. He was a legend. A 2-star general with over 30 years of service. He had commanded operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. He had been wounded twice and decorated 4 times. He didn't visit bases often, and when he did, it meant something. The base commander, Colonel Hayes, called an all-hands meeting that Thursday. Maria wasn't required to attend, but she could hear it from the hallway as she cleaned the adjacent conference room. "General Whitfield will be here Monday at 0900 hours, Hayes said, his voice firm and formal. "This is not a casual visit. He will tour the facilities, meet with command staff, and observe day-to-day operations. I expect this base to be immaculate. I expect every soldier to be sharp. I expect excellence." "Understood?" a chorus of voices responded. "Yes, sir." Maria wiped down the glass door and moved on to the next room. Over the next few days, the base transformed. Soldiers scrambled to clean barracks, organize offices, and polish boots. Officers reviewed schedules and checked uniforms. Everyone wanted to make a good impression. Maria's workload doubled. She was asked to deep clean conference rooms, touch up scuffed walls, and wax floors that didn't need waxing. She didn't complain. She just worked. On Friday evening, as she was finishing up in the main administrative building, she ran into Staff Sergeant Brennan again. He was carrying a stack of files and looking stressed. He barely glanced at her. "Make sure this hallway is spotless by Monday," he said. "The general's going to walk right through here." Maria nodded. "Yes, sir." Brennan paused. He looked at her for the first time, really looked at her, but there was no recognition in his eyes. "Just impatience. You understand English, right?" he asked. Maria's hands tightened on the mop handle. "Yes, sir. I understand." "Good. Just making sure." He walked away without another word. Maria stood in the empty hallway for a long moment. Then she dipped the mop back into the bucket and kept working. That weekend, Maria stayed late both days. She cleaned every corner of Building 7. She scrubbed the floors until they gleamed. She dusted vents, wiped baseboards, and polished doorknobs. She moved through the building like a ghost, unnoticed and unacknowledged. On Sunday night, as she locked up her supply closet, she allowed herself one small moment. She stood in the center of the main hallway and looked down its length. The floor reflected the overhead lights like a mirror. Everything was perfect. She thought about the general's visit. She wondered if he would even notice the floors. Probably not. Generals didn't notice janitors, but she had done her job. That was enough. Monday morning came cold and clear. Maria arrived at 5 as always. She changed into her gray uniform, pulled her hair back, and began her rounds. By 8:30, the base was buzzing. Soldiers stood at attention outside buildings. Flags had been raised. Vehicles had been parked in perfect rows. At 8:50, a black SUV rolled through the front gate. General Whitfield had arrived. Maria was mopping the hallway in Building 7 when she heard the commotion outside. Voices, footsteps, the sharp rhythm of boots on pavement. She glanced toward the glass doors at the end of the hall but kept working. The doors opened. A group of officers entered, flanking a tall man in a crisp uniform. His chest was covered in ribbons. His posture was straight as steel. His eyes were sharp and serious. General Whitfield. Behind him, Colonel Hayes was talking quickly, gesturing toward different parts of the building. The general nodded but said little. His gaze swept the hallway, taking in every detail, and then his eyes landed on Maria. She was halfway down the hall, mop in hand, standing beside her bucket. She stepped aside respectfully, lowering her gaze as the group passed. But the general stopped walking. Everyone else stopped too. Colonel Hayes looked confused. "Sir?" General Whitfield didn't answer. He was staring at Maria. His expression had changed. The sternness was gone. In its place was something else, something like recognition. He took one step forward, then another. Maria's heart began to pound. The general stopped 3 feet in front of her. The entire group stood frozen watching. And then, slowly, General Whitfield went down on one knee. The hallway went silent. Colonel Hayes's mouth opened, but no words came out. Staff Sergeant Brennan, standing near the back of the group, looked like he'd been struck by lightning. The other officers exchanged glances, confusion spreading across their faces like wildfire. General Whitfield was on one knee. In front of the janitor, Maria's hands trembled on the mop handle. Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to speak, to move, to do something, but her body wouldn't obey. She just stood there, staring down at the man kneeling before her. The general looked up at her. His eyes were wet. "Sergeant Santos," he said quietly. His voice cracked on her name. The words hit the hallway like a grenade. "Sergeant. Not janitor." "Not ma'am." Sergeant Colonel Hayes stepped forward, his face pale. "General, I don't understand." Whitfield raised one hand, silencing him without looking away from Maria. "Do you remember me, Sergeant?" Maria's lips parted. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Yes, sir. I remember." The general's jaw tightened. He blinked hard, then nodded once. "I owe you my life." The officers stood frozen. No one dared to breathe. Whitfield slowly rose to his feet, but he didn't step back. He stayed close, his eyes locked on hers. 12 years ago. Helmand Province, Afghanistan. You pulled me out of a burning vehicle after an IED strike. You carried me 200 yards under enemy fire. You stopped the bleeding. You kept me conscious. You saved my life. Maria's eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. "I was just doing my job, sir." "No," Whitfield said firmly. "You went far beyond your job. You risked everything. And I never got the chance to thank you properly." He turned to face the group of stunned officers. His voice grew stronger, more commanding. "This woman is a hero. She served 3 tours in Afghanistan as a combat medic with the 82nd Airborne. She has a Bronze Star with Valor, a Purple Heart, and a combat medical badge. She saved more lives than most of us will ever know." Colonel Hayes looked like the floor had disappeared beneath him. I had no idea, sir." "Why would you?" Whitfield's tone was sharp now. "Did anyone bother to ask?" No one answered. The general looked back at Maria. His expression softened. "Why didn't you tell anyone who you are?" Maria lowered her gaze. "Because it doesn't matter anymore, sir. That part of my life is over. Like hell it is." The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of an order. Whitfield gestured to Colonel Hayes. "I want her full file on my desk in 30 minutes. I want to know everything. How she ended up here. Why she's mopping floors instead of training medics. All of it." Hayes snapped to attention. "Yes, sir." "Right away, sir." The general turned back to Maria one more time. "We're not done, Sergeant. Not by a long shot." Then he walked past her, his entourage scrambling to follow. The hallway emptied as quickly as it had filled. Maria stood alone, still holding the mop. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. For the first time in 3 years, someone had seen her. Really seen her. 20 minutes later, Maria was called to the base commander's office. She had never been inside before. It was large and sterile, with flags in the corners and commendations on the walls. Colonel Hayes sat behind his desk, his face tight with stress. General Whitfield sat across from him, reading a file. Maria's file. Hayes gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Miss Santos." Maria sat. She kept her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. Old habits. Whitfield didn't look up from the file. He was silent for a long moment, his eyes scanning the pages. Then he closed it carefully and set it on the desk. "You were medically retired," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir," Maria replied. "PTSD, traumatic brain injury, chronic pain from shrapnel wounds." "Yes, sir." Whitfield leaned back in his chair. "And after you got out, you couldn't find work." Maria hesitated. "I found work, sir, just not the kind I expected." "You applied to be a VA counselor, a paramedic instructor, a logistics coordinator, all jobs you were more than qualified for." He tapped the file. "You were turned down for every single one." Maria said nothing. Hayes cleared his throat. "With all due respect, General, I still don't understand how this happened. How did she end up as a janitor here?" Whitfield's eyes didn't leave Maria. "Because no one wanted to hire a broken soldier." The words stung, but they were true. Maria had applied to dozens of jobs after her discharge. She had sent out resumes, made phone calls, gone to interviews, but every time it was the same story. Employers saw the medical retirement. They saw the PTSD diagnosis. They saw the gaps in her work history, and they saw risk. So they smiled politely, thanked her for her service, and hired someone else. Eventually, she stopped trying. She took the only job she could find, cleaning floors at the base where she once served. It wasn't what she wanted, but it was survival. Whitfield stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the base. "How long have you been here, Sergeant?" 3 years, sir." "And in those 3 years, did anyone ever ask about your background? Your service?" Maria thought about it. "Once, a captain asked if I'd ever been in the military. I said yes. He said, 'Thank you for your service,' and then walked away." Whitfield shook his head slowly. "We do this to our people. We use them up, and then we forget about them." Hayes shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, if I had known, you should have known." Whitfield's voice was cold. "She works on a military base. Her file is in the system. It would have taken one phone call to HR, one background check, but no one cared enough to look." The room fell silent. Whitfield turned back to Maria. "Do you still have your medical skills?" "I keep up with my certifications, sir. On my own time." "Why?" Maria met his eyes. "Because it's who I am." The general studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Good, because I'm not letting you waste away in a supply closet." He turned to Hayes. "Effective immediately, Maria Santos is reassigned. I want her working with the base medical team, training, mentoring, whatever she's capable of. And I want her to receive back pay for the difference in rank and position she should have had from day one." Hayes blinked. "Sir, I'm not sure I have the authority." "Then I'll make the call myself." Whitfield's tone left no room for argument. Maria's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to say thank you, to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Whitfield looked at her one more time. "You saved my life, Sergeant. Now let me help save yours." The news spread across the base like wildfire. By lunchtime, everyone knew. The janitor wasn't just a janitor. She was a decorated war hero. She had saved a general's life. She had served with honor and been forgotten. And now everything had changed. Maria walked through the halls that afternoon, and for the first time, people looked at her differently. Soldiers nodded as she passed. Officers stopped to shake her hand. A young private even saluted her. She didn't know how to feel about it. Part of her was grateful, part of her was angry, and part of her just felt tired, because the truth was, she was the same person she'd been yesterday. She had the same scars, the same skills, the same story. The only thing that had changed was that people finally knew. That evening, as Maria was leaving the base, she saw Staff Sergeant Brennan standing near the parking lot. He was alone, leaning against a concrete barrier, staring at the ground. She almost walked past him. But something made her stop. "Sergeant Brennan," she said quietly. He looked up. His face was pale. Sergeant Santos," he swallowed hard. "I owe you an apology." Maria waited. "I treated you like you were nobody," Brennan said. His voice was thick with shame. "I didn't even see you, and I'm sorry." Maria looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "Apology accepted." Brennan exhaled, relief flooding his face. "Thank you." Maria turned to leave, but then she stopped. She looked back at him. "Sergeant Brennan?" "Yes, ma'am." "Next time you see someone doing a hard job quietly, don't assume they're less than you. You have no idea what they've survived." Brennan nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. I won't forget." Maria walked to her car, got in, and drove home. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. The next morning, Maria didn't report to the janitorial supply closet. Instead, she walked through the front doors of the base medical facility, wearing clean scrubs and carrying a small duffel bag. Her heart hammered in her chest. Her palms were sweaty. She hadn't worn scrubs in over a decade. She felt like she was walking into her past. The head nurse, Captain Linda Graves, met her in the lobby. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying blonde hair pulled into a bun. She smiled warmly and extended her hand. "Sergeant Santos, it's an honor." Maria shook her hand. "Thank you, ma'am. But you can call me Maria." "Only if you call me Linda." Captain Graves gestured down the hallway. "Come on, let me show you around." As they walked through the facility, Maria felt a strange mix of emotions. The smell of disinfectant, the sound of monitors beeping, the sight of young medics rushing between rooms. It was all so familiar, and yet it felt like stepping into someone else's life. "We run a small operation here," Linda explained. "Mostly routine care. Physicals, vaccinations, minor injuries. But we also handle emergency response for the base and surrounding areas. And we train new combat medics before they deploy." Maria nodded, taking it all in. Linda stopped outside a classroom. Through the window, Maria could see a group of young soldiers sitting at desks, listening to an instructor at the front. "That's our current class," Linda said. 12 students. Bright kids but green. Most of them have never seen real trauma. She looked at Maria. "General Whitfield requested that you work with them. Share your experience. Teach them what the manuals can't." Maria's stomach tightened. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for that." "Why not?" "Because I'm not a teacher. I was just a medic." Linda smiled gently. "You were a medic who saved lives under fire. You kept a general alive when most people would have panicked. That's exactly what these kids need to learn." Maria looked through the window again. The students were so young. Some of them couldn't have been older than 20. They had no idea what was waiting for them. She knew. She remembered. "Okay," Maria said quietly. "I'll try." Her first day teaching was harder than she expected. The students were polite but skeptical. They had heard the stories by now. Everyone on base had. But hearing about a hero and learning from one were two different things. Maria stood at the front of the classroom feeling exposed. She wasn't used to people staring at her. For 3 years she had been invisible. Now 12 pairs of eyes watched her every move. "My name is Maria Santos," she began. Her voice was steady, but her hands were clasped tightly behind her back. "I served 3 tours as a combat medic with the 82nd Airborne. I'm here to help prepare you for what you might face downrange." One of the students, a young man with red hair and freckles, raised his hand. "Is it true you saved General Whitfield's life?" Maria hesitated. "Yes, how?" She took a breath. His convoy hit an IED outside a village in Helmand Province. The lead vehicle flipped and caught fire. The general was trapped inside with a broken leg and shrapnel wounds. I pulled him out, stabilized him, and kept him alive until the medevac arrived. The room was silent. Another student, a young woman with dark eyes, spoke up. "Were you scared?" Maria looked at her. "Terrified." The honesty seemed to surprise them. "But I didn't have time to think about it," Maria continued. When you're in the moment, your training takes over. You do what needs to be done. Fear comes later. The red-haired student leaned forward. What was the hardest part? Maria thought about it. Knowing I couldn't save everyone. The weight of those words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Over the following weeks, Maria found her rhythm. She taught the students how to treat gunshot wounds, sucking chest wounds, traumatic amputations. She showed them how to work under pressure, how to prioritize patients, how to stay calm when everything around them was chaos. But more than that, she taught them the things the manuals didn't cover. She taught them how to talk to a dying soldier, how to hold someone's hand when there was nothing else you could do, how to carry the weight of loss without letting it crush you. The students began to trust her. They asked questions. They shared their fears. And slowly, Maria began to feel like she was doing something that mattered again. One afternoon, the young woman with dark eyes, her name was Private Jessica Ruiz, stayed after class. "Sergeant Santos?" she said hesitantly. Maria looked up from the desk where she was organizing supplies. "What is it, Ruiz?" "Can I ask you something personal?" Maria nodded. "Go ahead," Jessica shifted her weight. "After everything you saw, after everything you went through, how did you keep going?" It was a question Maria had asked herself 1,000 times. She set down the supplies and leaned against the desk. "Honestly, some days I didn't. Some days I just survived. I went through the motions. I got out of bed because I had to, not because I wanted to." Jessica frowned. "But you're here now. You're still fighting." Maria smiled softly. "Yeah, I guess I am. How?" Maria thought about General Whitfield kneeling in the hallway. She thought about Linda giving her a second chance. She thought about these students looking to her for guidance. "I found a reason," she said. "It took a long time. But I found it," Jessica nodded slowly. "Thank you, Sergeant." As the young woman left, Maria felt something shift inside her. Something small but important. Hope. But not everyone on base was happy about Maria's return. There were whispers, rumors. Some people questioned whether she was really fit to teach. They pointed to her medical discharge, her PTSD diagnosis, the years she had spent mopping floors. One officer in particular, Major Derek Brennan, Kyle Brennan's older brother, made his opinion known loudly and often. "She's damaged goods," he said one day in the officers' mess hall, loud enough for others to hear. "I don't care what she did 12 years ago. The Army retired her for a reason, and now we're supposed to trust her with our medics?" Captain Graves, who happened to be sitting nearby, set down her coffee cup. "That's enough, Major." Brennan turned to her. "With all due respect, Captain, I'm entitled to my opinion." "Your opinion is based on ignorance," Linda said coolly. "Maria Santos has more real-world experience than half the instructors on this base combined. The students respect her. They're learning from her, and frankly, we're lucky to have her," Brennan smirked. "Lucky? She's a cleaning lady who got a pity promotion because a general felt guilty." Linda stood up. "She's a decorated combat veteran who saved lives while you were still in high school. So unless you have something constructive to add, I suggest you keep your mouth shut." The mess hall went quiet. Brennan's face turned red. He stood abruptly, grabbed his tray, and walked out. Maria heard about the confrontation later that day. Linda told her, thinking she should know. Maria listened quietly, then nodded. "Thank you for standing up for me." "I didn't do it for you," Linda said. "I did it because he was wrong." Maria smiled faintly. "Still, thank you." But the encounter stayed with her. She knew that not everyone would accept her. Some people would always see her as broken, as less than, and maybe part of her still believed it too. That weekend, Maria received a phone call. It was General Whitfield. "Sergeant Santos," he said. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, sir." "Good, I wanted to check in. See how you're settling into your new role." Maria glanced around her small apartment. It was modest but clean. A single bedroom, a worn couch, a few framed photos on the wall. Pictures of her old unit. Friends she hadn't seen in years. "It's going well, sir," she said. "The students are good. Captain Graves has been very supportive. I'm glad to hear it." There was a pause. "I also heard there's been some pushback." Maria wasn't surprised. "Nothing I can't handle, sir, I'm sure. But I want you to know something." Whitfield's tone grew serious. "You belong there, Maria, not because I pulled strings, but because you earned it. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Maria's throat tightened. Yes, sir. And one more thing, sir. I'm putting you in for a commendation. The Army failed you when you got out. That's on us. But I'm going to make sure your service is recognized the way it should have been from the beginning. Maria didn't know what to say. Sir, you don't have to. Yes, I do. His voice was firm. You've spent too long in the shadows, Sergeant. It's time people see you for who you really are. After they hung up, Maria sat on her couch for a long time, staring at the photos on the wall. For the first time in years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she was enough. 3 weeks later, the base held a formal ceremony in the main parade ground. Maria didn't want it. She had argued against it. But General Whitfield insisted. And when a 2-star general insists, you don't argue for long. The morning was clear and cool. Flags snapped in the breeze. Rows of soldiers stood at attention in their dress uniforms. Base personnel lined the edges of the field. Even some local news crews had shown up, cameras ready. Maria stood off to the side in her own dress uniform, feeling like an imposter. The jacket felt tight across her shoulders. The medals on her chest felt heavy. She hadn't worn this uniform in over a decade. Captain Graves stood beside her. You ready? Maria shook her head. No. Linda smiled. Good, that means you're human. At precisely 1000 hours, the ceremony began. Colonel Hayes stood at the podium and gave opening remarks. He talked about service and sacrifice. He talked about the unsung heroes who never seek recognition. And then he called Maria forward. Her legs felt like lead as she walked across the field. Every eye was on her. The cameras followed her movement. She kept her gaze straight ahead, focusing on the podium, on the flags, on anything but the crowd. General Whitfield stood waiting. He was in full dress uniform, his chest covered in ribbons and badges. When Maria reached him, she snapped to attention and saluted. He returned the salute, then gestured for her to stand beside him. Ladies and gentlemen, Whitfield began, his voice carrying across the field. We are here today to honor a soldier who has already given more to this country than most of us ever will. And yet, until recently, she was invisible to us. He paused, letting the words sink in. 12 years ago, in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, then Sergeant Maria Santos saved my life. My convoy had been hit by an improvised explosive device. My vehicle was on fire. I was trapped, injured, and losing blood. Sergeant Santos ran into that fire. She pulled me out. She treated my wounds under enemy fire. She carried me 200 yards to safety, and she did it without hesitation. The crowd was silent. But that wasn't the only life she saved, Whitfield continued. Over 3 tours of duty, Sergeant Santos treated hundreds of wounded soldiers. She worked in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. She was wounded twice herself. And she never stopped. Not until her body gave her no choice. He turned to look at Maria. After she was medically retired, the system failed her. We failed her. She came home with invisible wounds, and instead of helping her heal, we let her fall through the cracks. She ended up working as a janitor on this very base, cleaning the floors she once walked as a soldier. Maria felt her eyes sting. She blinked hard, willing the tears not to fall. But she never complained, Whitfield said. She never asked for recognition. She just kept going, because that's what soldiers do. He picked up a framed certificate from the podium. Today, the United States Army is awarding Sergeant Maria Santos the Soldier's Medal for her actions in Afghanistan. This is the highest honor the Army can bestow for non-combat heroism. Applause erupted across the field. Whitfield handed her the certificate, then pinned the medal to her chest. His hands were steady, but his eyes were wet. Thank you, Sergeant, he said quietly. For everything. Maria's voice came out in a whisper. Just doing my job, sir. No. Whitfield shook his head. You did far more than that. After the ceremony, dozens of people came up to congratulate her. Officers shook her hand. Enlisted soldiers thanked her. Parents of young medics told her how much their children had learned from her. Even some of the local reporters asked for interviews. Maria was polite but overwhelmed. She answered questions. She smiled for photos. but inside she just wanted to disappear. Finally, Captain Graves rescued her. "Okay, everyone, give the woman some space. She's had a long morning." Linda walked Maria back toward the medical facility. "You okay?" Maria nodded. "Yeah, just a lot. I know. But you did good. You should be proud." Maria looked down at the medal on her chest. "I don't know if I deserve this." Linda stopped walking. She turned to face Maria, her expression serious. "Listen to me. You saved lives. You sacrificed your body and your peace of mind for people you didn't even know. You've earned every bit of recognition you're getting. And more." Maria met her eyes. "It doesn't change what happened after. It doesn't erase the last 12 years. "No," Linda agreed. "But it gives you a foundation to build on. You're not starting from zero anymore, Maria. You're starting from here." That afternoon, Maria returned to the classroom. The students were waiting, and when she walked in, they all stood and applauded. Maria stopped in the doorway, surprised. "What's this?" Private Ruiz stepped forward, grinning. "We saw the ceremony, Sergeant. We wanted to congratulate you." The red-haired student, Private Carson, held up his phone. "You're all over the news. Hidden hero found mopping floors. It's everywhere." Maria shook her head, embarrassed. "Sit down, all of you. We have work to do." They sat, but they were still smiling. As Maria began the lesson, she realized something had changed. The students weren't just listening to her anymore. They believed in her. They trusted her. And that trust gave her strength. For the next 2 hours, she taught them how to treat blast injuries. She walked them through step-by-step procedures. She answered their questions. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. But the biggest surprise came at the end of the day. Maria was packing up her materials when there was a knock on the classroom door. She looked up. Major Derek Brennan stood in the doorway. Maria tensed. She hadn't spoken to him since the incident in the mess hall. She wasn't sure what to expect. Brennan stepped inside. He looked uncomfortable. "Sergeant Santos, do you have a minute?" Maria nodded slowly. "Of course." Brennan closed the door behind him. He stood there for a moment, hands clasped behind his back, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. Maria waited. "I said some things about you, things that were unfair and wrong." He met her eyes. "I judged you based on what I saw on the surface. I didn't bother to look deeper. And I'm sorry." Maria studied him. There was genuine regret in his face. "Apology accepted," she said quietly. Brennan exhaled. "Thank you." He hesitated, then continued. "My brother told me what you said to him, about not assuming people are less than you. It stuck with me, made me think about how I treat people." "Good," Maria said. "We all need to think about that sometimes." Brennan nodded. He started to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, Sergeant, I'm glad you're here. The students are lucky to have you." "Thank you, Major." After he left, Maria sat down at the desk and let out a long breath. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't just something you gave to others. Sometimes you had to give it to yourself, too. That evening, Maria drove home as the sun set over the Georgia pines. She thought about the ceremony, the medal, the apologies, the students who looked up to her. She thought about the janitor she had been just a few weeks ago. Invisible, forgotten, pushing a mop down empty hallways, and she thought about the woman she was becoming, visible, valued, teaching the next generation. It wasn't a perfect story. She still had scars. She still had nightmares. She still had days when getting out of bed felt impossible. But she also had hope, and purpose, and people who believed in her. That was enough. 2 months later, General Whitfield returned to Fort Marshall for a follow-up visit. This time, there was no fanfare, no formal inspection. He simply walked into the medical facility and asked to observe Maria's class. She was in the middle of a training exercise when he arrived. The students were practicing triage on simulated casualties. Maria moved between them, offering guidance, correcting techniques, encouraging them. Whitfield stood in the back of the room, watching silently. When the exercise ended, Maria dismissed the students. They filed out, nodding respectfully to the general as they passed. Once the room was empty, Whitfield walked over to Maria. "How are they doing?" he asked. "They're ready," Maria said. "Better than ready. They're going to save lives," Whitfield smiled. "Because you taught them," Maria shook her head. "I just gave them the tools. They did the rest. That's what good leaders do." Maria looked at him. "I'm not a leader, sir. I'm just—" "A sergeant who never gave up," Whitfield interrupted, "even when the world gave up on you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He handed it to her. Maria opened it carefully. Inside was a pair of silver captain's bars. Her breath caught. "The Army owes you more than a ceremony and a medal," Whitfield said. "I've been working with the Department of Defense to review your discharge. Your rank is being reinstated and you're being promoted to captain, effective immediately." Maria stared at the bars, unable to speak. "You'll oversee the combat medic training program here," Whitfield continued. "Full authority, full recognition, and full pay, retroactive to your discharge." Tears welled in Maria's eyes. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept." Maria looked up at him. This man whose life she had saved. This man who had refused to forget her. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "I accept," Whitfield smiled. Then once again he saluted her. This time Maria saluted back. Not as a janitor, not as a forgotten veteran, but as Captain Maria Santos, a soldier, a teacher, a hero. And finally, after all these years, she was home. The news spread quickly. By the next morning, the entire base knew. Maria walked through the hallways in her new uniform, the captain's bars gleaming on her shoulders. Soldiers saluted her as she passed. Officers nodded with respect, and in the main hallway of Building 7, the hallway she used to mop, a small plaque had been installed on the wall. It read, "In honor of Captain Maria Santos, 2nd Airborne Division, combat medic, hero, teacher. May we never forget those who serve in silence." Maria stood in front of the plaque for a long time. Then she smiled, turned and walked toward the medical facility. She had students to teach, lives to prepare, a future to build. And this time she wasn't invisible. She was exactly where she belonged.